All right, well, we've got Dr. Sten Ekberg here. He's a neurological-based chiropractor in, well, now Cumming, Alpharetta, Cumming.
Yeah.
Yes. And just, I didn't introduce this last time. He was here for the Stress Lunch and Learn. I see a few familiar faces from that. But former Olympian, he was a former Olympian in the decathlon, and it was the Barcelona Olympics. Is that correct? 10th place? Ninth place in the Barcelona Olympics. So that's why I keep kind of throwing that out there as a teaser. So he's here talking about Food for Humans, how to fuel your body properly. So let's just give him a big Lease Plan welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So how many people were here last time? One person. All right. All new faces. So last time we just talked a little bit about how the body works, that the brain and nervous system is what regulates the body, that it's not about the mechanics of the body, because the body parts and the functions, they're secondary to how well the brain is working. And we said that in order for that to happen, we have to realize the human is a chemical and a structural and an emotional being. And if we want to have optimal health, we have to address all three of those areas. We cannot just look at one thing and pay really close attention to that and ignore the others and think that everything's going to work. We have to look at the whole. That's what holism means. So today we will be talking about the nutrition aspect, the food aspect of health. And as always, we will go into very little detail as far as telling you eat this and this and this and this, because you've already heard that all your life. How many people know they're supposed to eat more vegetables, right? That's not so difficult to know. But what we will talk about is principles of why is it that way? How does the body work? What are the factors that determines how it works? So first of all, when it comes to food, it provides us two things. It provides fuel and building blocks. And food is that thing which is supposed to provide nutrition and sustenance and all of the things that the body needs. So if you eat for that reason, then you're eating food. If you're eating to change how you feel, you're eating drugs. Okay? So most of the time in this country, we're eating much more drugs than we're eating food. So we'll talk about how we can find a good balance there and how it actually works. So just because, we'll get into some detail here, but not too much. This is just to show you that food isn't just in your body after you put it in your mouth, because food doesn't do any good until it's in your cells. Everything before the cell is just a transportation system. First it's in your mouth, then it's in your gut, then it's in your digestive system, then it gets into your blood. It serves no purpose at all until it is inside your cells. So in order for that to happen, the body has to go through all these different steps. So first you chew it, and then you digest it, which is about secretions and peristalsis. Then when it's broken into small pieces, you absorb it, and then you can use those little pieces to build things up, and whatever you don't need, you have to excrete. But we also have to understand that this doesn't happen by accident. It's a very, very intricate process. It uses as much as a third of your entire energy expenditure. Of all of the energy that your body produces and gets out of food, a third of it's already spent just to get that stuff done. So the digestive tract is basically one hole in the one end and a hole in the other. And just because, like I said, you put things in the tube, it doesn't mean it gets into the body. And we talked about a little bit last time what happens with stress, how stress puts your body's attention toward danger and defense. Whenever there's something that your body needs to defend against, your body's resources go to that at the expense of digestion and internal resources. So anytime that you're stressed, then this process of extracting food is basically shut down. It's not working nearly as well when we're stressed because all of the blood and all the resources are going to put out the fires. So in order to really truly digest food, it's not just about eating the right thing, it's also about having the whole process in place to take care of it. So we can be, if we live in a high stress lifestyle, we can actually eat all the right stuff and still be undernourished because your body doesn't utilize it properly. So the 4 basic food groups, everybody knows those. The stuff that will make me fat, stuff that makes me sick, stuff that will kill me, and stuff I'll eat anyway. Gotta know those. So we'll talk just a little bit about the food pyramid and what's wrong with it. There's so much emphasis on the components of the food, that the grams of fat and protein and carbohydrate, and those are mostly nonsensical. It doesn't tell you anything about the quality of the food and what this food is going to do for you. So fat, protein, and carbohydrate, what do they do in the body? Well, fat serves as fuel, it serves as reserves, energy reserves. It's a precursor for hormones. Most of our hormones are built either from fat or protein. They are structural and they serve as insulation. High quality fats are some of the most important things that we can eat. There's a lot of talk about fish oil now. It contains 2 things, which is EPA, which is anti-inflammatory and helps with cardiovascular disease, things like that. And the other portion is DHA, which is the #1 structural component of your nervous system and of every cell membrane in your body. So if you're not eating fish oil, you should start and get a good quality one. Protein acts same exact functions, fuel, reserves, hormones, structural, but it's also the only tissue that can perform contraction. So muscles are protein. And then we get to carbohydrate, and carbohydrate is fuel. That's basically it. That it doesn't really do much. So in terms of quality of food, what we need to focus on is the quality of the fat that we're getting, the quality of the protein that we're getting, and carbohydrates, they are good, especially when we get them through vegetables. But the problem is we're getting most of them through starches, and then they do more damage than good. But as you can see, the important ones are... If you can write them down and save them till afterwards, we'll have a time for that. So fat and protein are the quality, that's the important stuff, and carbohydrate is not a big deal. But when we look at the food pyramid, we see that 6 to 11 servings they recommend should come from bread, cereal, rice, and pasta. These are all starches. And that's not really where you want to get your food at all in terms of nutrition. This part provides you fuel. If you're running a marathon or you're on the road biking all the time, then this is good fuel. But other than that, it doesn't do much for you. So, what is good food? And when we talk about the quality of food, we need to realize the stuff that is good food is the stuff that satisfies the criteria that we talked about. It needs to provide sustenance, it needs to provide fuel, it needs to provide building blocks, but it also needs to interact favorably with that whole process of taking the food in. The body has to know what to do with it. So you have a whole system of enzymes and receptors that have developed over millions of years that interact and that have a molecular fit with the food that you eat. So the food that's the good for you, the food that's really beneficial, is the food that your DNA recognizes. Because your DNA is the blueprint that makes the proteins and the hormones and the enzymes that are supposed to take care of this stuff. And if you put things into your body that you don't have the enzymes and digestive stuff to take care of, then that stuff is a burden on your body. So let's look at this. Our DNA has developed over millions of years, but this is one thing that all physiologists agree on. It has not changed significantly in the last 40,000 years. So the significance of that is anything that's been introduced in human diets in the last 40,000 years is an experiment. It's really, really new. It's so new that your body doesn't really know what to do with it. And so for all of this time, this is 40,000 years, that's how long your DNA has been unchanged. And for that period of time, we have been mostly hunter-gatherers. We have been walking around and eating whatever we can catch and grow and pick. Then around 4,000 years ago, we developed agriculture. And agriculture changed a lot of things. It allowed for civilization to develop because we could keep people in one place, and some people could do agriculture and other people could do other services. So society became more advanced, and it was a very efficient food source. But even though it's been around for 4,000 years, the stuff coming from agriculture, grains, is still news. It's still relatively new to the body. And in the last 150 years, that little line over there, that's how long we've had a modest amount of sugar and processed grains, meaning baked product made from wheat and oats and things like that. And then in the last 50 years, we've had an abundant amount of sugar and processed grains. And not only that, but those grains have been changed around so that 4,000 years ago we had 3 kinds of wheat, and today we have 25,000. And most of those have developed in the last 20, 30 years. So the grains we're eating are not the same grains that these guys ate. But on top of that, everything is processed and there's an abundance of sugar and grain. The average sugar consumption in this country is 0.5 pound per person per day. That's from the ketchup and the sodas and the pastries and the snacks and the chocolate bars and all that. 0.5 pound a day. So what this means is your body, your DNA has had no time whatsoever to adapt and respond and change, because it doesn't happen in hundreds of years or thousands of years. It happens in tens of thousands of years. So in order to provide more of what your body really wants, you have to look at, well, what did the earth look like? What were the things available back then? And it doesn't mean you have to become a hunter-gatherer, but we have to shift our food choices a little bit in that direction. And if you think about it, humans are the only animals on the planet that don't eat everything straight from the planet. That eat anything that comes out of a package or is cooked or processed or changed in any way. Every other animal eats things they can catch, pick, or gather, anything that runs, swims, moves, or grows, and anything that was part of a living, breathing biology and ecosystem up until the time that it was caught or picked and eaten. So everything else on the planet eats really, really fresh stuff. And we eat stuff that's been sitting on the shelf for a couple of years. And the only way that they can keep it on the shelf for a couple of years without growing stuff is to kill off everything of nutrition in that product so it'll keep for that long. So nothing else wants to eat that. All right? So what do we want to feed Homo sapiens? And that's us, by the way. Meat, fish, fowl, but we don't want to get it from a mass factory farm. We want to get it, we want to get the animals that have been having a normal life, because that's a completely different nutrition. Nuts, fruits and berries, vegetables, roots, and grains are fine in moderation, but they should be as whole as possible, and there should be a minimum of modern processed wheats. You're much better off eating rice and oats and millet and an occasional rye or wheat bread sandwich or something like that. What about weight gain? So this is the secret about weight gain. It's when food is absorbed faster than it's used, then the excess must be stored. And what are the things that get absorbed the fastest? From the time that you eat them until they're in the bloodstream, it's sugars and starches. So that's why we gain weight from eating those. And what do we feel like eating when we're stressed? Okay? Because when you're stressed, that's an emergency situation. Your body is preparing to defend against something. It wants to raise the blood sugar. What's the fastest way? It's to eat sugar and starch. So anytime that we are stressed, then we're going to eat the worst stuff as well. So the primary fat storing hormone, fat cannot be created or stored without the presence of insulin. Insulin takes sugar from the bloodstream and it takes it into the cell. Whatever the cell can use, it burns up. The excess turns into fat. And insulin is the hormone that does that. So weight gain is not really caused by calories and it's not caused by eating fat. It is caused by eating foods that trigger insulin. And that's the sugars and the starches. And if you notice, when you eat sugar and starch, you're never really satisfied. As soon as an hour or two after you've eaten, you can always eat something else. Whereas if you eat something with a lot of fiber, a lot of vegetables, a lot of protein, and some fat, then you're satisfied, and you're satisfied for a much longer time. And fat and protein do not trigger insulin. So you can eat those things, but they're absorbed so slowly that there is no insulin effect. And because of that, it is, I'm not going to say you can't gain weight from doing that, because I'm sure somebody could prove me wrong. But it is much more difficult to gain weight from that. So then people say, well, I can't eat the good stuff because it's so expensive. So I brought this up to help people understand how cheap food really is. In 1930, we spent almost a quarter of our total income on food. And it's dropped throughout the years until today. It's less than 10% of our income that we spend on food. And this decline in price is partially because we're better at producing food. Our general level of income is going up, but it also comes at a price because the quality of food has gone down. So what we want to do is spend maybe a little bit more and go look for that whole food and go look for that organic produce and get the grass-fed beef and get the free-range chicken, and don't always look for the cheapest because there is a quality difference. So what do we want to prioritize? Because food, there's so much complexity. The more magazines on food you read, the more confused you get. So I said we could talk about principles, and here are some of them. Learn how to balance blood sugar. Eat things that are lower in sugar, starch, and alcohol. These things are not poisons, but they become a burden on the body in excess. We have enzymes to deal with them. We have alcohol dehydrogenase. It is a part of food. But in excess, it becomes a burden because it starts pushing and shifting things around. Eat more whole, live, and raw food. Whatever the earth produced for us is what the body is designed. The DNA, you have the receptors and the enzymes. There's a match there. You have no match for artificial sweeteners and artificial colors and artificial flavors and all of that stuff. Balanced pH, that means eat more alkaline food. So basically, it's not just the pH of whatever food that you test outside the body, but it's the end result by the time your body has processed it. And it turns out modern humans are very, very acidic. And everything that we eat, except fruits and vegetables, is acidic. So breads and meats and grains and beans and all of those things are acidic, but we balance it out by eating fruits and vegetables. So as long as we have a balance, we're okay. But if we only eat the acidic stuff, then we're going to build up more and more and more acid. And what is the one thing, the number one way for the body to counteract that acidity is called calcium carbonate. And where does that come from? Your bones, exactly. So if you have acid in your body, that gets in the blood, and the only way for your body to balance that acid is to pull calcium. The primary way is to pull calcium from the bone. So osteoporosis is not so much about eating calcium as it is getting a pH balance in your body. So more vegetables and fruits. And then you want to start reducing the poisons and increasing nutrient concentration. That means organic, free-range, local, sustainable farming. There's a reason. It's not just the pesticides that they spray on there, even though that's bad enough. And there's 85,000 chemicals introduced into our environment in the last 100 years. But it's also about the nutrient concentration, that when you grow something in the soil, it pulls about 50 to 55 minerals out of that soil that becomes part of the plant, that becomes part of you. Then once you've grown the same thing for a long time, the soil becomes depleted. And then you have to add back nutrients and minerals into the soil to grow something. Well, guess what? You only have to add back 3 nutrients to make it look like a tomato again. So the organic is part about the fact that they have to add back all of those 50 minerals and nutrients because it's more of a sustainable, it's the whole, what am I looking for? The way nature intended it. We're bringing things back to balance. We're not just robbing the soil and putting back a little bit. We're working with nature. So, we talked about this last time, but we'll do it a little bit again since there's only one person who's a repeat. That if something's required to maintain health, that means you have to meet all those requirements. So if you're trying to raise a plant and you see it wilting a little bit, what's the first thing you're going to give it? Water. And then you feed it some water and it's still wilting, and what do you try now? Give it some sunshine, take it out of the closet, give it some light. And it's still wilting, so now you look for the soil. Maybe there's toxins in the soil, maybe there's nutrients missing. But it's really, really simple. We understand that a plant needs water, sunshine, and good soil. And if it doesn't get that, you can never raise a healthy plant. If you try 1,000 plants for a year, you're not going to have any left if you don't give them these things. Well, the same thing holds true with humans, that we require nutrition, we require movement, and we require well-being. We need to eat will feel good, and move properly. So what that means is, if it's required, you can get by for a while, but you can never thrive in the long run. You can never thrive for as long as you're supposed to. And how long are we supposed to live? Probably past 100. Probably enjoying that in good life without any degenerative diseases whatsoever. And you can violate these laws for a long time, 10, 20, 30, 40 years probably, but you can never work as well as you're supposed to if you don't. So, I think that is all. I don't know if we're coming back here, but if we do, please feel free to invite some people who need to learn more about how to stay well. And do we have any questions?